Hey, everybody. Welcome back to State of Independence. I have a special guest for us this week. We have James Wiley, a libertarian candidate for the Secretary of State position in Colorado. I met him last year whenever I went to the INC in Denver, and we had some great conversations there. He was running for Congress last time, and he just informed me he's running for Secretary of State now. So we're going to have a conversation about a few things today. How you doing, James?
Absolutely terrific. Thanks for having me on, Tucker. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, man, especially having a good guest like you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, awesome, man. So there's a lot of stuff that's just been on my mind lately, a lot of stuff that's really worrying me. And like one of them especially is Palantir. Now, I'm sure you know a lot about Palantir.
Well, I know about just as much as AI can tell me. So
Uh yeah.
there's a huge depth to that. Obviously, a lot of it is classified, not available online, not accessible to the public, not even accessible to the public shareholders of Palantir. But we do our best to work around that to find out the information to learn the truth. And fortunately, due to a number of whistleblowers, the most famous of being Edward Snowden, we do actually have some information, and so we can look at behind the curtain and see some of the origins of Palantir through some of those leaks. But unfortunately, so much has been happening so recently. It's going to be decades to come that we're going to be unraveling the web, the trap that we're finding ourselves in now with this state overreach, like you mentioned, the tyranny that's growing in our midst.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of people concerned about the NSA growing in power and the Patriot Act and people like Edward Snowden coming out to really tell us that they're not using their power like they're supposed to. They're not appropriately doing what they said they would do. And what a lot of people don't realize is Palantir is like the evolved, upgraded, futuristic version of the NSA. It is, or a futuristic tool and arm of the NSA. And in my opinion, it's really George Orwell's nightmare.
Yes, and globalized, very much so. It is a nightmare to even contemplate or consider the aspects of our lives that are being influenced by Palantir. The founders, they claim that they have a difficult job of balancing civil liberties with national security. I don't think there's any balance there whatsoever. They have positioned themselves like many private companies. A couple of other leaks, not directly related to Palantir, kind of give us a view of the model by which Palantir operates. I think the most productive for this conversation is to look at the Twitter files, which we received a couple of years ago, thanks to Elon Musk's purchase of now X. And we saw through that the close relationship between corporations, in this case Twitter, and the government, and specifically the FBI and CIA, specifically the FBI. And so this corporation was performing tasks on the behest of the FBI and actually getting compensated to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. It was a major component of their bottom line. And when Elon stopped honoring those specific federal contracts and agreements, they lost so much revenue that they had to start shutting down servers and making drastic cuts to personnel. They fired 80% of the company at least as a result of that, because they lost that massive stream of revenue. Twitter was free. There was almost no ads, all this other stuff. There was some, but very, very on the side as far as a source of revenue. They really depended on the federal government for that relationship, which makes them state actors. It makes them integrated with the function of the government. It makes them closely related to the decision making processes in government, both taking direction from government and then providing feedback to government in a decision making capacity, so that there's a full loop there, and you can't really separate one from the other at that point. And we saw how that was used to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop, to suppress COVID disinformation, and other things. And that's just people trying to express their truth, if not in some cases the truth, as we found out after the fact, online, and being suppressed for their freedom of speech.
Yeah,
And so
you're even seeing small cases like the other day. A guy asked AI, said, "Why is BlackRock buying up single family homes?" And the AI said, "That is not true. That is inaccurate." And a deeper dive said that it was actually Blackstone that was buying the single family homes, and BlackRock owns Blackstone. But even the AI is being pushed in their algorithms to not say anything negative against corporations or their control. And it's crazy. It's the little bubble of propaganda that we're being put into is otherworldly, and I just don't know how other people don't see it.
It does become a kraken when you have this interrelationship of ownership between different companies, different investment firms owning shares in each other, and then between the group of them owning the vast majority of private companies. So, is there any autonomy or independence in any of these publicly traded companies? I would say no. I would say absolutely none, because ultimately you can't point to one person or one head or one entity that's the center of this creature, but it is identifiably the same creature, the same entity, and many tentacles. And we'll talk about a lot of those different tentacles today, and how far and vast and wide they reach around the world. But
So
it's definitely a scary thing to begin to contemplate and to investigate.
So, with the growing corruption and intermingling between these mega corporations and the government, and a lot of influence and decision making being pushed between some of these corporations and some of these billionaires that have bought influence, like, how would you describe the shape of our government right now? Because in some ways, you would think that a corporation being partially controlled, owned by the government, would be a socialist type government, but we're not really seeing socialism. Like, how would you describe what's going on right now?
Uh, it's challenging to answer that question on socialism specifically. Some of the co-founders of Palantir are former were born in the Western Bloc. Some of them, like Peter Thiel, he was born in East Germany, and ultimately moved to America, South Africa, and elsewhere around the world. So you would think that those individuals would have a revulsion to communism, and in interviews with him and other co-founders, they talk about being anti-communist, and how, for example, the Communist Party of I think France has one of their main agendas to fire Palantir, and so they take pride in that anti-communist position. But it's a very small difference between totalitarian, far right existence of interrelationship between corporations and government, and communism. There's very little difference in there.
I
There's
fully
three
agree.
components. Yeah, there's three components to socialism, more specifically communism: corporations, the government, and religion. And because oftentimes communist governments are atheistic, then that is the relationship between the corporation, the state, and the religion, is because they're eliminating religion. So they integrate God into the state, and you worship the state. And then as the corporation seizes the means, as the state seizes the means of production from corporations, or just as with Donald Trump, seizes 10% of Intel, that is an integration of that final piece, which we're seeing take place with Palantir in countries representing 45% of the global GDP are utilizing Palantir products.
Mm.
Countries that are largely aligned with the traditional ally bloc are well captured by this entity as well. And so you really can't separate Palantir from these governments anymore. It's largely focused on like the Five Eyes states is where it began, but it's spread to a lot of other states as well. A lot of the other countries are captured. And it's not that they hired Palantir; it's that Palantir captured their taxpayer dollars, and their nation is now subservient to this corporate entity. And they don't really see it that way, but it's impossible to separate the two, and therefore the one that is international and crosses those borders must be the dominant entity, if not dominant, at least controlling in the background, and that's definitely what we see.
Yeah, somewhat of a hostile takeover over borders and across oceans just from one company, just buying up so many small corporations, buying up so many bonds, buying up debts and other things like that to the point to where, like you said, they're basically enslaved by this company.
And the financial component of Palantir is de-emphasized. Supposedly, they don't have a relationship with the Federal Reserve. Supposedly, they don't do a lot with fintech, but the founders come from fintech. So Peter Thiel himself, the co-founder of PayPal, and others have been very much involved in the financial aspect of things. So we know that the markets are largely influenced by the actions which Palantir takes on behalf of its corporate clients as well. So a lot of the corporate clients that it serves are receiving taxpayer money as well. So we're looking at something like 75-80% of Palantir revenue, either directly or indirectly, comes from the federal government. 50% of it is directly, but that's a large percent of their revenue is derived from that space. And so they're influencing quite a few agencies, and I was looking at all the agencies that had contracts with them. The list got so long. I'm like, oh, okay, let me try an easier list. Let me find the federal government agencies that don't have contracts, and it's like the Environmental Protection Agency, the Bureau of Land Management, Parks and Wildlife Services, and like the Center for Arts, or I forget what that department is. And it's like 4 or 5 agencies don't have federal contracts with Palantir, and the rest do. So that is not just regulatory capture, that's regulatory integration. That's like parasitic existence of this AI conglomerate that's taken place here. Oftentimes, it's misunderstood the role that Palantir takes. They're not like Google with Google Gemini or OpenAI with GPT or X with Grok. They integrate some of those solutions into what they do, but largely they're not as focused on language learning models, though do integrate with those solutions. They're more focused on the harvesting aspect of the data, where they get the data from, on which they then train the models. Their specific in-house private models that they use for their clients. And so that's an interesting piece. Oh, they need data which isn't usually accessible. They're able to acquire that data through these relationships with government agencies.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that about the data because a lot of people don't probably don't have the right idea about Palantir. They don't understand what it is. What they're trying to do is they're taking all of the departments of the government and they're taking all the information from those departments. They're taking all of these websites, all of these companies that have any information about you, and they're putting it all together into one database. So there's like an insanely comprehensive, detailed file about you that they want to use to have predictive algorithms to flag you before you even commit crimes. Now, tell me if that doesn't sound like a dystopian sci fi movie.
Minority Report right there, pre-crime.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they can analyze patterns and find anomalies and essentially say, hey, you look like you're about to commit a crime. Let's go ahead and have some FBI agents intimidate you, knock on your door. Definitely happened to me before. So that is something to realize is taking place here today now. It's not some far off fantasy. It's not, oh, in 5 years or 10 years or our grandchildren will have to face this. No, we're facing this. It's happening to us now,
Yes.
and we need to find a way to backpedal extremely fast. I'm a libertarian, so this isn't going to be surprising, but more government is not good. A government who knows every detail about your lives, maybe that's not a good thing. So we need a weak government so that we can have strong people. When you have strong government, then the government sees strong people as a threat and crushes them whenever they rise up. So we need
Exactly.
to empower the people more.
Yeah, and I admit I was one of those people that bought into the Donald Trump message that he was going to make government smaller. He was going to cut a lot of this stuff, and I bought into the Elon Musk thing coming in with the chainsaw, saying he was going to cut all these departments. And I was excited about it. I really thought that they were going to pop the trunk on the government and show us all the nasty, bad stuff that's been going on that we haven't known about, and they were going to cut all of this out, and we were actually going to have a balanced budget and good functioning government. But all that happened was they went in, they cut some random little bullshit out here and there, and then they took all that money they saved and they shoved it to the military budget.
Yeah, it's one thing omitted from Doge's operation was defense. And like you said, the funding was redirected from all those areas of savings, kind of like distractions. Let's keep Elon occupied for 6 months. Think of the economic loss to his companies, where he could have actually been producing value for his companies in the future. So he was distracted by this by this carrot. Basically, here we're going to cut some waste in this area, but then, like you said, they redirected all into defense spending, and there was no cuts to defense. He wasn't allowed to in that space to make any cuts.
Yeah, we had the first $1 trillion defense budget. And I was watching a video the other day, and somebody said that if we cut the defense budget by 25%, we would still spend more than the other six countries behind us combined. So, yeah, it's crazy.
There were all over the world. We're the world's police. We've got military bases surrounding all of our enemies on every single side, and all of our potential enemies, more likely making them enemies as a result of our presence in those places. And a lot of this is backed up and supported by the operations of Palantir. The genocide in Gaza is a Palantir operation. The targeted assassination of civilians in hospitals is the result of Palantir's surveillance operations, locating what they think might be militants and bombing everything around them at the same time. So this is not an innocent and again potential future catastrophe. The body count is in the tens, hundreds of thousands, if not millions already, as a result of not just AI, but again, the relationship between corporations and the government, and the lack of ability to separate those, then empowered by the most potentially sinister technology in all human
Yeah.
history, AI.
And
Oh, it would be great, but in this case, it's not.
it's one thing to be a military company that makes missiles and makes jets, but it's a whole other thing to be an AI tech company that literally sells the government a way to, on a massive scale, find and kill people, especially civilians.
You got
And
Lockheed Martin and Booz Allen. That represents part of the private revenue of Palantir.
yeah,
That they are government contractors, military contractors, and so it is a lot of violence. The business of violence and AI is real, and it's taking place.
yeah,
And
and don't think that Gaza is not a test for something that's going to happen further. I'm sure that Gaza is the test ground for a lot of this new technology. And whenever they start making stricter laws and people actually finally wake up and start wanting to push back, they're going to start using some of these technologies that they used in Gaza because they know they work now.
the militarization of the police has been an ongoing trend for decades, and that's more obvious in the large equipment and people carriers and obviously everything they're decked out with. SWAT teams is military grade equipment, but what about military grade intelligence? And that is headed to the streets of the United States of America. Obviously, it's already there in D.C., and there's cases being made for the deployment in Chicago. I saw a poll recently that and the poll was kind of tongue in cheek, but still 30% of the respondents to the poll indicated that they would be comfortable with a temporary tyranny under Trump in order to clean up America. And so there are a lot of people who are so afraid of the mess that was made by the left under Biden that they're begging for the tyranny on the right.
Yeah, that's a perfect example, because somebody was making a good point the other day. They said, it was a little conspiratorial, the conversation the person was having, but they were saying one of the reason that the left did a lot of these things and let a lot of the migrants into the country, and did a lot of things that really radicalized people and kind of pushed them to the right. Even some people that were previously Democrats, previously independents, found themselves being labeled as far right, being labeled as racist and all these other things by the progressive and the left. So it kind of it radicalized people to the sense to where they're like, I'm willing to take this far right tyranny to answer this terrible far left that I've been dealing with, when the answer is really somewhere in the middle. But when you switch from far left to far right, it's radicalism. It's just they switch to each other real quickly. It's like extreme this way, extreme that way.
Like we just escaped one prison camp to find ourselves in another.
Yeah.
So we barely caught our breath running away, and then nope, we're caught again. But by supposedly the entity that was going to liberate us is here to terrorize us,
Yeah.
and a lot of that, unfortunately, this beast that we're talking about and the relationship with communism, the three components, it does have all three. And this goes back to Israel because Israel is a Zionist state. It's a religious state.
Yes.
And not that the religion claims the Israel, it's that Israel claims the religion. I want to be very
Yes.
clear about that.
Yes.
And so Israel, in that position that they're in, has essentially massive influence into Palantir. The One of their founders, Peter Thiel, he is a huge supporter of Israel. Many of the other founders are Jewish themselves, and so their support of Israel, not related to them being Jewish necessarily, but
Yeah.
that independently has resulted in kind of like a surrounding of Israel in a protective component. And we talked about the genocide, but this is larger than that. This is a capture of
Yes.
other foreign governments for the purpose of utilizing them for the benefit of Israel and creating an ally in Axis. And there's about 22% of the global GDP, which is represented by people who countries who are opposed to the use of Palantir and any of their systems or even entering their country whatsoever. And then we have that 45%, which utilizes Palantir, and then quite a few in the middle, which the smaller countries are not as interested. But that basically represents the formation of competing factions and the potential rise of World War III, just on the basis of who's a client of Palantir or not. And because we have the religion, which brings an irrational component, and there's a lot of value to religion in somebody's personal life, not necessarily in the operations of the state.
Yeah.
But when you bring that irrationality and saying, well, we're chosen, or this is our land, the Bible tells us so, or the Torah tells us so. And then we combine that with the very aggressive and violent state, and you combine that with the resources and ability of a corporation to be able to violate people's rights privately, things that the state couldn't do. So we saw this with Dominion Voting Systems. Dominion Voting Systems Incorporated, a Canadian company, came to the United States, captured over 50% of our voting systems, and then on behalf of the government and under contract with the government as state actors, violated the rights of millions of voters here in America, but we're never held accountable because it's a private entity. They can do what they want. And then the government officials which hired Dominion couldn't be held accountable because, oh, they didn't actually do anything. Yeah, so they create this fake separation of private and public operations where they're really integrated. So we see the same thing
Yes.
happen with Twitter, and then we see the same thing happen with Palantir. So the government is outsourcing civil rights violations to private companies. Not okay.
Yeah. Exactly. It's ridiculous. And a lot of the censoring that you're seeing is coming from Israeli-based tech.
Yes.
Israeli tech companies. And also, something that I found to be alarming is most VPNs that people use are actually linked to a lot of Israeli companies that are connected to Israeli intelligence. So if you're using a VPN and you think you're privately using the internet, no, there's probably some Mossad person monitoring exactly what you're doing.
Well, you would hope it'd be a Mossad person because,
Yeah.
well, they have to sleep sometimes. They get tired. They can only drink so much coffee.
Oh, an
But that's not
AI.
the case. The AI sees all.
You're right, my friend. Yes. Yeah, the AI never has to sleep, it never has to eat. It sees all. And before we move on away from Israel, I just wanted to like say really quickly like what you can legally prove is that Israel has influenced our Congress to the point to where AIPAC is paying 80% of our representatives. That's disgusting. I've been trying to tell as many people that as possible. APAC needs to be registered as a foreign entity. They shouldn't be able to give money like that to our politicians. JFK tried to address that same problem, and that's one of the reasons he got unalived. So that's one thing about Israel is that you can legally prove yes, APAC has given that much money. Now, my uh, let me think, for example. Yeah, my representative here, Congress, Chuck Flashman, he got $5,000 from Israel. My senator got $250,000 from Israel. And then another Congress member got $25,000 from Israel here in Tennessee. And that's just the ones that I could easily find, like at the top of a Google search. So it is insane how much influence a foreign government has in our lives. And they're at the end of the day, it's cheaper for these Israeli PACs to send money to our politicians than it is to actually pay for their own defense.
Great return on investment.
Yeah. Yeah. So overall it's like an investment for them. So it's ridiculous. They need to be they need to be registered as a foreign entity, and people need to wake up and just see this because the Conservative Party was looking good whenever the election came around, and I was like, oh yeah, they're saying a lot of the right things. America first, America first. I didn't know America first actually meant Israel first. So I'm learning a lot, and I'm trying to open other people's eyes about it because however you feel about Israel, there shouldn't you shouldn't have a foreign government influencing our representatives, and you shouldn't have dual citizenship representatives. I think you should abolish that.
Yeah, unfortunately, the most criticism we're going to get of Israel from this administration is they don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah,
And I appreciated that, and that was
I did
very
too.
encouraging. But that was kind of off the cuff. That was his emotional component speaking. And then just a little while later, when asked if the war in Iran is going to continue, he defers to Bibi. He's like, "Well, the boss is here. Let me ask the boss what he thinks. If he wants to continue this war, we'll absolutely do that for him. We'll put boots on the ground. We'll sacrifice a whole generation of another generation, a third generation in a row, for the sake of this foreign nation." And that's just disappointing. So yeah, we've seen some good things from Trump. We've seen his coalition since the election start to fall apart on this point, and that's really unfortunate. The libertarians are no longer backing Trump because of his progressive warmongering, and there's a lot of other groups who stood by him initially that aren't going to continue to do so, and probably won't be supporting his
Yeah.
successor in the next election.
Well, it's I just feel like every year that goes by, each party in their own way, in their own flavor, stomps on the Bill of Rights and the Constitution even more. They all take an oath and they say, I will uphold the Constitution. And that is the biggest load of shit ever because they go in there and they ignore the Constitution and they go around it. They use these little court rulings to say, oh, well, it's interpreted this way. And then now it's even getting to the point to where Trump is like, oh, well, screw the court rulings. I'm just going to ignore them if I don't like them. So, yeah, the I don't understand, man. I mean, I see people every day, wearing hats that say "We the People" and all this other stuff, and it's like we don't even realize that our Constitution is being eroded out from under us, and we're not doing anything about it.
Falling away real fast.
Yeah,
Definitely a House of Cards. We're supposed to have some kind of separation of powers, and some balance between the judges and the administration, and unfortunately, as much as I am opposed to a lot of the animus expressed by the some leftist judges or judges in general weighing into political matters, I'm equally appalled at the hubris of the executive in taking so many actions. And we thought Biden's auto pen was bad. And we definitely know Trump is signing. He puts a lot of emphasis into the fact that that's his
yeah,
signature. We get to watch it again and again. And he'll use 10 different pens for the same signature. And quite the talent. I couldn't do that.
yeah.
But ultimately, is there any consciousness from the executive entity, the president, before or after the election going into these decisions? Really, no. And so Trump should be accused of the auto pen to the extent that Biden was. He's not really aware of the harm and illegality behind some of these things. Take the flag burning thing. That's obviously illegal. The
That's
Supreme Court
yeah.
president on that point.
That's they already ruled on that before, that it's part of your freedom of speech. And then I did a video that actually got about 1,200 views in a day that I was impressed by. But actually, if you burn the American flag previously, it's legal, it's freedom of speech. If you burn the Israeli flag, you could get 5 years in prison.
That's the detail on the executive order. I did not see that.
Well, this was one that was previously from a hate speech thing. I don't know if that was the new executive order, but from a law about hate speech, they said that you could get up to 5 years in prison for burning an Israeli flag because it's not a, a commentary against the state. It's considered anti-Semitism, which is the most manufactured blanketed word ever.
Religious bigotry, and that's the angle that they use to make it a hate crime instead of political expression. And Israel and Judea, like the Jewish people in Israel, those are not synonymous by any means. And I stand by my Jewish brothers and sisters who stand against Israel, and there are many of them. I would say,
Yeah,
I don't know about a majority, but a large percentage do not support what's happening in Israel because they recognize what the consequences of this is going to be. What is the ethnic karma that the Jewish people are going to inherit as a result of this adventurism into imperialistic empire development and colonialism?
yeah. And
Well, karma isn't good.
how do you escape the oppression of Nazi Germany and fascism and being rounded up and put into camps to then 80 years later become Nazi fascist with a Star of David on your chest and round up Palestinians and put them into a camp? Like, come on, man.
Using the previous example as justification for the following. So
It
then you
exactly.
can't say the Holocaust happened, so I have to do this. It's like, wait, no, you're repeating that cycle, but you put on the Nazi hat in order to do that, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and I actually learned some interesting history about that. Is some of the Nazis actually helped some of the Zionists start the state of Israel. It was a mix of, the Britain helped establish Palestine because they owned some of it. They helped some of the Jewish people get established, but also early on the Nazis wanted the Jewish people to voluntarily leave. So they let some of the Jewish people that were rich keep a lot of their materials and a lot of their money if they would move to Palestine, and they actually helped them get started there. And there was a point where I think even the Jewish people that were living there wanted to fight the British. Like it was an interesting little twist of history.
Yes, and when you look at where the British got it from, the whole picture starts to come into focus. That was land owned by the Ottoman Empire, a Muslim dominant political entity, very large, which had existed for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And not quite the inheritor of the Roman legacy, not quite at all in the cultural sense of things, but inheritor of the Roman territory. And so we have the Ottoman Empire existing for over 1,000 years and dominating that part of the world and not enabling basically the not quite 1,000 years, but since the Crusades, essentially, since
Yeah.
the Saracens took back the Holy Land. And so you had a lack of access to that space for any kind of political purposes, for religious purposes. Absolutely, it was a free country. They had Jews, Muslims, and Christians worshiping there in Jerusalem as a holy city, recognizing it as such freely for hundreds and hundreds of years, with the occasional exception of some deviation from that norm.
Yeah.
But it was World War One, which some people speculate was developed for the purpose of recapturing the Holy Land from the Ottoman Empire, and World War Two, which would have been necessary to generate the sympathetic urge in order to create a
Yeah.
state out of nowhere, the Israeli state, which now exists there.
And I'm sure you know the Balfour Declaration to Lord Rothschild is
Yes.
what brought the United States into World War One, because they were promised the land of Palestine in exchange for getting the United States into the war.
And the Rothschild Bank being one of the early victims of Nazism in Germany, and the central bank that they had there being kicked out of Germany essentially
Yeah.
created quite a bit of tension between those entities. And so after World War One, leading into World War Two, they had the perfect storm that they needed to generate massive amount of debt and then that sympathetic pull. And some
Yes.
of the numbers could be debated on how all that played out. But in general, I want to recognize that the number one victim of World War II was the Russians. Absolutely. Like a third of their population massacred. So, and then the Chinese at the hands of the Japanese. So this whole Holocaust is a side piece, a sideshow versus the massacre of World War One and World War Two.
Well,
And
James, we're about to get cut short because the Zoom only goes for, I think, 45 minutes. I'm going to have to
okay,
reset and do a part two. So, guys, join us for part two. I'll see you in just a minute, James.
okay, bye.